Thanks, Senator. Senator Warren of Massachusetts is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for holding this hearing. So fentanyl killed more than 78,000 Americans last year, including more than 2,300 people in Massachusetts. And crypto helps fund that death toll. Crypto plays a role at every stage in the illicit fentanyl trade. Chinese companies sell the chemical ingredients used to make fentanyl to drug cartels, and they get paid in crypto. The drug cartels and the traffickers sell their deadly drugs in the darkest marketplaces, and they get paid in crypto to the tune of about $1.5 billion in 2022. And drug kingpins buy weapons and cars and make payoffs, again, using crypto. Now, the Trump administration's DEA spotted this problem 5 years ago. In their 2018 threat assessment, they said that cryptocurrencies, quote, offer traffickers a relatively secure method for moving illicit proceeds around the world with much less risk compared to traditional methods. And since then, the problem has only gotten worse. Take one case. Last year, the Department of Justice indicted a Sinaloa cartel member who laundered nearly $900,000 in crypto by directing their U.S.-based drug couriers to deposit cash straight into the cartel's crypto accounts. And what did they then turn around and use that crypto for? They reinvested in the cartel's fentanyl factory so that they could pump more fentanyl into the United States. Now, Mr. Yoes, thank you for your work and for the work of hundreds of thousands of police officers in the United States who are on the front lines in the opioid crisis. You've seen the various tricks that drug traffickers use to move their drug money around. So if I can, let me ask you, why do you think cartel members find crypto such an attractive option?
Well, Senator, thank you. Thank you for those comments. And I don't portray myself to be an expert on crypto.
Fair enough.
But I will say that I think what we see is an evolution. That evolution is crypto today. It's going to be something later. I think it's just the next thing that we have not. It's in law enforcement, we follow the money. It just makes it harder to follow the money. So I think the fact that it's a emerging. There's a lot of things that we still need to figure out about this, and I think that's what the appeal is to it. We're a little behind in truly understanding how to use it in a way that helps us combat crime. All
right. So, Mr. Urban, you have decades of experience at DEA following illicit fentanyl funds. Why do you think crypto has become so attractive?
It allows for speed.
So you can move it fast.
Yes.
Unlike cash, which you've actually got to physically carry.
It's larger. You physically got to carry it. It's much more difficult to conceal.
Okay.
So there's speed. There's to some degree anonymity, and then they can hold that asset and transfer and move that asset easily. So they're exploiting the organized crime, the Mexican cartels, the lack of compliance and oversight within the crypto industry.
Just a lot easier to hide it? Is that basically what you're saying here?
It's easier to hide. Yeah, correct.
Yeah. So, make no mistake, drug traffickers are also still moving cash the old-fashioned way. But crypto has changed the game by allowing criminals to move boatloads of money instantaneously and nearly anonymously. No need to try to stuff $900,000 in cold hard cash into a suitcase and worry about whether some customs agent will spot it. Now cartel members can move as much money as they want using a handful of crypto wallets. Holes in our anti-money laundering laws have given drug dealers a back door to move their dirty fentanyl money around, and that back door is wide open, and it's helping fuel the opioid crisis at home. Mr. Yoes, if cartels and drug dealers and Chinese chemical companies can keep exploiting the holes in our anti-money laundering rules and keep funding the fentanyl business with crypto, what's that going to mean both for law enforcement and for families across this country?
Senator, it's not a matter of can. They will.
They will.
They will, and they do, and they will continue to do it until we find ways to close those gaps.
All right. Well, it is about closing the doors, and that's why 20 senators, including 7 right here on the Banking Committee, are working to pass a Digital Asset Anti-Money Laundering Act that closes these loopholes in our money laundering rules. Crypto shouldn't get a free pass, and I look forward to working with all of my colleagues to finally fix that. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Senator Vance of Ohio is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, could I ask for personal privilege for 10 seconds?
Yes, sir.
Is that okay, JD? One of my staff members and colleagues is leaving for the private sector, Mary Kirshner, and she's done an extraordinary job for the people of Louisiana and the American people. She's here today. I wanted to recognize her and thank her for her service. Thank you,
Senator
Mr.
Kennedy. Senator Vance of Ohio is recognized.
Thank you, Senator Vance.
Yeah, of course, and congrats, Mary, and best wishes to you. Thank you for your service. Thanks to the chairman and the ranking member for having this important hearing, and thanks to the 3 witnesses for being with us today. I wanted to focus a little bit on this question. You know, when we talk about fentanyl trafficking in particular, I worry a lot that, you know, we're always in this body a few years behind what's actually going on in our country. And you know, I think back to, you know, my own very personal experience with opioid addiction in my family. And, you know, 10 years ago, what everyone was talking about was prescription painkillers. But of course, 10 years ago, prescription painkillers were sort of giving way to street heroin. And then 5 years ago, everyone was talking about street heroin, but heroin was kind of giving way to fentanyl. And now we're all talking about fentanyl, and we should, of course. It's extremely dangerous. It kills a lot of our fellow citizens and orphans a lot of our kids. But I wonder whether we're missing the next thing, and I'd like us to maybe get ahead of the next thing. In particular, I'm worried about, and I am nitazines, or zines is sort of it's commonly called on the street. And Mr. Urban, I want to focus my questions towards you because, as I understand it, nitazines, I should say, are actually substantially more potent than fentanyl. And I've even talked to people just in the past few days who've been able to order this stuff on the internet, comes directly to their door, and they're dealing with a street drug that is substantially more powerful than what we give, you know, pregnant women in a hospital who are about to deliver a baby. This is extraordinarily potent stuff for people to just be able to order via mail. I want to sort of start out just there, Mr. Urban, and kind of understand. So, am I right to assume that when the CCP started cracking down on fentanyl under pressure from the Trump administration in 2018-29, we actually saw a pretty significant reduction in fentanyl coming into the country from the CCP. Is that correct?
Fentanyl coming in directly from mainland China via parcel, there was a significant reduction, yes, sir.
Okay. So here's, I guess, my question. Maybe just give me a sense of what you're seeing when it comes to nitazines. How much have we seen a significant increase in this stuff? Are we seeing a larger number of people killed by this stuff? Like what's going on? Are you know, am I right to worry that nitazines are today what fentanyl was 5 years ago?
I think you're right to worry. I think your thought process in terms of trying to get ahead of this and create speed to identify the network and what they're distributing on the street, whether it be controlling it, whether it be emergency scheduling, whatever DEA suggests in terms of what they're seeing on the street, whether it be the streets of Kensington with one of these zines. The cartels, whether it's the Chinese chemical suppliers or the Mexican cartels themselves, will always look to exploit more deadly, more addictive substances within our country. So I think the plan you want to put into place and what you're suggesting is the ability to think ahead, to plan ahead, to negate it.
Yep. So I'm going to ask a question, and recognizing you work for the DEA and are not a State Department official, so if you don't feel comfortable answering this question, let me know, but I'm going to ask it anyway. So when you think about like why people might deal drugs, so the obvious answer is greed, right? People want to make money. That's one reason why you might sell nitazines or fentanyl or anything else. But do you worry that there's a kind of a national security or a national competitive element to this? I mean, China's fundamentally a state-controlled economy. Do you think that they're aware of what's going on? Are we sort of witnessing something like a reverse opium war where they are intentionally allowing this stuff to come into our country because it's killing, 120,000 people a year, and it's significantly impairing a lot more than that?
So in general, when I was with the DEA and we focused on the China threat, I did not have insight within mainland China with the CCP and directly what you're saying. However, I do think they can dramatically increase their efforts to negate the precursors of chemicals and everything we're talking about with Chinese money laundering that's happening on WeChat. And that could happen and should happen, and it's not.
So at the risk of going pretty far out there, I mean, given that China is a largely state-controlled economy, and it's not exactly easy to manufacture nitazines, I wonder if we're looking at something like a state sponsor of terrorism argument here, where they are explicitly permitting a weapon of mass destruction, a weapon of chemical warfare, effectively, to enter our country. Of course, that assumes a lot, some of which I think we should be more careful about, but I really think that we should be worried about how much China knows that it's destabilizing our country, it's killing our people, it's of course doing tremendous damage to our workforce. And we ought to be looking into this and really exerting whatever diplomatic pressure we can on the Communist Chinese to stop this stuff. I appreciate your time, all of you. Mr. Urban, I appreciate your answer my questions. I yield.
Senator Reid of Rhode Island is recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I first want to begin by commending Chairman Brown and Ranking Member Scott for drafting and bringing to the floor the Fentanyl Act. There was 60 of us that supported it, and as chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee, I tried my best to get it included on the National Defense Authorization Act. Unfortunately, as I believe Senator Scott indicated, Republicans in the House objected to it, and we have to get it done. I would ask, beginning with Mr. DeFord and the rest of the panel, to just comment on why you think this legislation is so critical and how it would be helpful.
I think, first of all, I think that this piece of legislation is extremely helpful because it's stopping the core of the supply. It's stopping the supply chain and doing everything we can to put a kink in that. But equally, I think any bill that is bringing attention to what I think the most brilliant thing said up here today is when my friend next to me said that, what does it take to make it a crisis? Are we going to wait until it's 500,000 people a year? Because I tell you what, we are really close.
Thank you. Mr. Yost?
Sir, I think, I mean, the end result is obviously we're seeing what's happening. There's no question. It's here in front of us. And no matter, every minute we take to discuss and argue about what's the proper path to go, we're losing lives and we're losing this war. And the reality is we truly need to pull together and recognize that this transcends political parties and political beliefs.
Now, from the perspective of the police on the street, you see that dimension. But there's another possible dimension, that China's interest is not just to make money, but really to undermine our social fabric in their competition with us. Do you get a sense from this?
Look, my view is a little different. I guess we look at a global perspective here. Mine's, our members are more focused on how it's affecting our communities. But let's just be honest. There's no way in the world that China doesn't know the damage that's being done in this country. So you're either fixing the problem or you're part of the problem. So their knowledge of the damage that's done and not taking any action is in fact their action.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Urban, please.
Yes, sir. So the Act itself allows for more offensive sanctions and AML compliance. Now it'll benefit law enforcement as it targets money laundering networks too. Mm-hmm. It takes forfeited Mexican cartel property, Chinese money laundering property, and puts it back into law enforcement investigative operations. There additional funding is needed for investigative opportunities that exist right now in terms of taking that data in and networking that data and pushing target packages out to identify the networks and engage them.
And it would help the coordination between federal authorities and local authorities in terms of targeting fentanyl. Right?
Absolutely. We want to map the network. It takes a network to defeat this network. Right? So these are networked organized crime activities where you need communication, transportation, and financial transactions for it to work efficiently. And it is working efficiently, unfortunately, and you need to attack all three components to that.
And Mr. Yos, again, from the perspective of the street officer, you could, I think, concur that, that they might not know where all the information is coming from, but they need the information.
No doubt, no question. Information is key.
Right. Well, thank you all very much. This is a critical problem in my home state of Rhode Island. I think we lost, unfortunately, 434 Rhode Islanders, and for the smallest state in the country, that's a lot of people. Thank you.
Ames isn't on remote, is Thank you, Senator Reid. Senator Lummis is recognized.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank our witnesses for being here today. Every state is a border state right now when it comes to fentanyl, including my home state of Wyoming, which one has to pass through both New Mexico and Colorado to get north to Wyoming. But we know that fentanyl, the precursor chemicals, and many of the traffickers themselves are bringing this poison into our country via the southern border. So it's the crisis at the border and the failed policies at the border that are the chief contributor to the deaths of more than 73,000 Americans in 2022. Fentanyl deaths in Wyoming have gone up significantly in recent years. In 2019, there were 11 due to fentanyl overdose. By 2022, that number has risen to 53. And my state has the smallest population of any state in the nation. So this trend across the country is terrifying. Laramie County, which is Cheyenne, is right along I-80, which is a major corridor east to west in the U.S. Last June, police seized more than 9,000 fentanyl pills in a single bust. So we know that Interstate 80 is a corridor for trafficking of these drugs once they get into the United States. So this is a very timely hearing, and I appreciate you all being here today. We also know that when there's a surge in migrants at the southern border, that personnel are focused on processing them, and that takes attention away from the trafficking of drugs. So it has coincided that when there's a surge in illegal migrants crossing the border, there is also a surge in the transport of illegal drugs, fentanyl first and foremost among them. So we've got to get our southern border under control for the sake of Americans who are dying because of our open border policies that will not receive the attention from the current administration that it needs. That said, a couple of questions. Mr. Urban and Mr. Yos, how well do federal law enforcement agencies, whether it's CBP or ICE, communicate and cooperate with state and local law enforcement when it comes to cases in which seized fentanyl has been traced back to cartels?
So in a general sense, they cooperate well, but in terms of the threat and what we now face, they need to cooperate better. There needs to be more communication. There needs to be the advantage of taking advantage of the data that I talked about earlier. So the individual that was stopped with 9,000 pills, that should be immediately downloaded, taken back to a larger data tank to determine who else that individual was connected with within the network. So whether it's at the border, we can leverage that for interdiction in a moment's notice, or the other individuals that he is connected to within, again, the Mexican cartel network with speed.
Yeah. Now, I'll just add to that the working relationship between DEA and Homeland Security on this issue, the task force, play a pivotal role in our investigation, and we do have a good, strong working relationship in sharing information. Unfortunately, the demand is outpacing what the bandwidth is.
Yeah. So, Mr. Urban, how do we build and use technology so we can understand how cartels are operating and build a map of their activities.
So again, compared to when I targeted them with undercover money laundering activities, with undercovers and wiretaps, right now the opportunity exists to intake that data, right? So whether we have large data tanks that we talked about, whether it's FBI, DEA, HSI, and the individual enforcement that happens out on the street, whether it's a car stop or the arrest, we want to pull that data in, and it'll do two things. One, it maps out the network because, like I talked about earlier, they are connected through transportation, communication, and financial movements of money. Two, with speed, because if you had this platform set up within the federal law enforcement agencies here, you could kick out target packages to the field where they would be enabled to go effect arrests or enforcement.
I want to thank you, gentlemen, for being here. My time is up, but I also want to thank you, Mr. DeFord, for using your platform as a celebrity to call attention to this issue. We're grateful for your attendance today. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Senator Van Hollen of Maryland's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me thank you and the ranking member for your leadership and your legislation, and thank all of you for being here and for your efforts to address this crisis that we're facing. We know that drug cartels manufacture fake pills resembling prescription medications that are laced with lethal doses of fentanyl, and how they cunningly conceal fentanyl within other illicit drugs, knowingly poisoning Americans for their own profit. To share one devastating story from my home state of Maryland, a young lady, Trinity Ripley, lost her life to accidental fentanyl overdose after consuming a counterfeit pill just before Christmas last year. Trinity was only 18 years old, the daughter of Christine and Vaughn Ripley, who's a council member in the town of Brunswick in Frederick County in Western Maryland. Trinity died the first time she took an illicit pill of any kind. People like Trinity without an opioid tolerance face even greater risks of succumbing to a fentanyl overdose. Her father had spoken to her about these safety issues and the challenge with peer pressure. In his advocacy on this issue, Mr. Ripley has said, quote, "The thing that drives me nuts is that one pill can kill." And now he worries about Trinity's younger brother, Xander, potentially facing the same threat. Mr. Yos, in 2021, the DEA launched the One Pill Can Kill enforcement effort and public awareness campaign. Can you talk about what specific strategies that state and local law enforcement agencies are using that are, in your view, most effective?
And unfortunately, there are a whole lot of Trinities out there. And you're right, one pill can kill, and we're seeing it over and over and over. On a law enforcement standpoint, we're putting Band-Aids on problems because there's just so much activity taking place. There are really a couple of facets that we haven't talked. We talked a little bit about it, but there's another facet too. It certainly shouldn't be at the expense or taken away from the enforcement side of it. But it's programs like this that are going to, we're talking about the suppliers, and really a lot of this legislation is geared strictly for towards the those that are manufacturing, those that are bringing it in. And the reality is we really need to focus on the other side of this as well, how it's affecting our communities and how it's affecting families and the education portion part of it as well.
Thank you. And Mr. DeFord, I've been listening to your testimony from my office and all the testimony. Thank you for the powerful voice you bring to this crisis. Your experience, your voice, your music, not cut across party lines. They bring people together rather than divide them. And as all of us know, nobody cares whether someone is overdosed from fentanyl is a Democrat, Republican, or anything else. So thank you for your unifying force in addressing this crisis. You mentioned Baltimore City being one of the epicenters of the fentanyl crisis, and that's Our state of Maryland, like others, has not escaped this scourge. If you could just say, based on your experience, whether there are any misconceptions that others have about the group of people who end up using or dying from fentanyl, misconceptions that people have that could help us better address this crisis.
Thank you, sir. I want the record to reflect I'm an Orioles fan.
All right.
I think Trinity's story is the main story that we can reference right now about the misunderstanding about drugs in America and about what fentanyl is doing, is that the drug addict is shifting, right? Is that it's not always the drug addicts now. Sometimes it's just the young lady who took a pill the night before Christmas to maybe get sleep, maybe get the anxiety of Christmas off. I don't know Trinity's story, but I'm sure within my spirit she didn't take that pill to lose her life. And I think that this, excuse my language, but I speak very bluntly, the days of doing cocaine in the bathroom with a stranger are long behind us. My wife and I don't even trust Tylenols that have been opened now. That's how scary of a place we live in. And I think that the biggest misconception about this is that if it hasn't already ended up in your home and you're listening to this thinking it never will, you are wrong. It is on its way to your living room, and I suggest that we stand up and do more as fast as we possibly can.
Thank you for that important message.